I never got out of the van and went in the house because I knew what was going on in that dungeon.
You're smart. You're smart.
Yes.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty Nefaro, where we have our special guest, Mr. Bobby Fulton. Bobby, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, gentlemen? Well, it is my honor. I've always looked at myself as a trailblazer and a pioneer of sorts in professional wrestling, so I'm glad to have been asked to be a part of this kickoff show with this new YouTube for Monty and Pharaoh.
Wrestling. Can you tell fans how, from what I understand, your dad kind of helped you get into wrestling? Can you kind of give us the origins of Bobby Fulton?
Right. Well, I'll never forget, gentlemen, the first time I ever crossed in front of a TV screen, back in probably 1963 or 4, I was captivated by the sound of the pounding of the wrestling ring, by the small studio audience, and by the commentator whispering. Now he has him in a hammerlock and going on to describe the action. And to me, it was like hearing the New York Symphony. It was music to my ears and heart. And I started my love for professional wrestling at that point. It wasn't like today where the professional wrestlers go out before the show and wrestle in the ring. There was no such thing as that. But what I did do, I learned the best I could, because back then, they really didn't want you in the wrestling business. It might be hard, but there was no shoes, so to speak. And if you broke in, it's because you knew somebody. But when I broke in, me and this wrestler named Joseph Shedlock, he was so mad though Michaels, we wrestled our first match together. And the wrestler, we were like third match, but the dressing room emptied and pulled us apart because they thought we was going to kill each other. Well, I got my $5 payoff, and fellas, I'm going to tell you something. It was like I kissed the man on the moon. It was one of the greatest moments of my life to get a chance to get in the ring.
Bobby, can you tell us about coming across Stu Hart and where he comes in the picture as far as your training?
What had happened was I had started out, like I said, in West Virginia and Ohio, and wrestling in Kentucky, because I'd met up with Flying Fred Curry, who was running Ohio, and Wild Bull Curry. And I had a lot of matches with them. As a matter of fact, I wrestled on the WWF TV tapes in Allentown and Hamburg while I was still in high school. So as soon as I graduated high school, I left home and went to Kentucky to wrestle for a guy who was opening up a small territory. From there, I went to Nick Julius and worked for Nick Julius in Nashville. And it was after Nashville, I went to Calgary and worked for Stu Hart. I remember Owen Hart running around the dressing room, his little 11-year-old boy. Ross Hart, of course, was there trying to help and give the finishes. And Bret Hart had started, but who really got my eye there was a young athlete by the name of Dynamite Kid. And fellas, I want to tell you something. He was one of the greatest talents I'd ever seen in my entire life. I got a chance to witness him in a match with Steve Wright, who was Alex Wright's father, from Germany.
Okay.
And you talked about a match. I love that territory. It was a great place to learn. But concerning Stu Hart, I never got out of the van and went in the house because I knew what was going on in that dungeon.
You're smart. Smart.
Yes. Yes.
What was your impressions of Bret Hart? Did you see that talent early on? Did you know he was going to be what
Oh,
he turned
yeah.
out to be?
And he was really good. And I wanted to add one thing.
Sure.
I'll never forget when I first pulled up to the Hart house. I was in a van, and there was all these Cadillacs that had cracked windshields and stuff, just sitting all over the place up there at the Hart house, that three-story house overlooking Calgary. And I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Well, whenever Stu tries to start his Cadillac, if it don't run, he just hits the windshield, busts the windshield, and moves on to another car." And before my answer, I should do a bit of a let me show you Monty and Pharaoh this hold that I did with Luther Lindsay. And once he would hook you in that hold, and I've seen him do it to guys, he would say, "Fight, fight, fight." He liked that idea. He liked to inflict pain on others. Well, I was there, as a matter of fact. Him and Dynamite Kid had a newspaper reporter down in the dungeon.
Uh-oh.
And they worked him out and worked him out and worked him out. And finally, Stu hooked him. And Stu told him, Stu broke his arm. And he went back and put that in the paper. He said, "I'm 60-some years old. Kid, imagine if one of my young wrestlers was to get a hold of you, exactly what would happen to you." So Stu was always taking care of the business. And yes, Bret Hart was phenomenal even then. You know, he had some grooming to do, but I mean, what a great place for Calgary. You had Japanese wrestlers coming, guys from England there, guys from Mexico, guys from the United States and Canada. When I was there, Leo Burt was there, Joe Ventura, Hubert Gallant. They were the French-Canadian connection. No Class Bobby Bass. Even the great John Foley was a referee. Lynn Denton, David Patterson, the Hart brothers. One night we were in the ring in Montana, and Wayne Hart was doing the refereeing. And he told his brother, Caesar Bruce, he said, "If I drop your hand one more time, the match is over." Well, he did. And he rung the bell, and his brother jumped up and punched him in the face right there in the ring. And the fight went all the way back to the dressing room, and all the boys and John Foley was just watching as they were fighting amongst themselves. It was wild. It was a great territory to learn in, and it was a lot of fun times. I was pretty beefy back then. I was a heel, as Bobby Fulton. I always thought I was a better heel than a baby face.
Yeah.
But what happened was the Giant had a sleeping sickness. So I stood up in the van going 100 miles an hour, like threatening I was going to slap him in the back of the head. Well, Lynn Denton was in the seat right behind him, the grappler Lynn Denton. And all of a sudden, I'm looking back at everybody in the back of the van, and Lynn Denton kicks the Giant in the head. Well, I turned back around with my fist doubled up, and I'm looking eye to eye to the Giant. Well, he backhands me with that big old finger of his and splits my lips. Now I know I'm driving 100 miles an hour in a van, and I'm thinking, how can I retaliate? I thought about putting a towel around his neck when he turned back around, but I didn't have a towel big enough to choke him out. I figured I'd just make it matter. So later on that night, Angel Acevita started opening up beer bottles. Labatt's Blue, and he would throw it and hit the Giant in the back of the head. Well, the next thing I know, I'm sitting in the back of the van. The Giant has a glass orange juice bottle, getting ready to throw it and hit me in the face. And Angel Acevita said, "No, no, no. It wasn't Bobby that did it, it was me." And the Giant turned around and said, "Let's stop the van," Angel Acevita did. "Let's get outside and settle this fight." That's what used to happen. Like Jim Neidhart would stop the van and fight the monks. I'd got in fights with the late Tom Stanton while driving down the van because there was 8 or 10 guys together and all kinds of pandemonium was breaking loose. Well, Angel, the giant, Haystack said, no, 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 Angel. Let's just forget that this even happened. Because he'd heard the stories. Angel Acevita one night fought 11 hockey guys in Saskatoon. He had blades sticking out of both sides of his hands, shutting them hockey players up in a bar. So nobody wanted to mess with Angel, considering the blades and stuff like that. But yeah, there was often fights and things. It was so funny in that territory. I loved it, but it was a lot of learning to do.
You know, you're mentioning a lot of fights. How about Dynamite and Davy Boy? You know, unfortunately, they had a reputation to be bullies. How were they to you, and did you see any of that stuff?
Well, when I was there in 1980, before Davy Boy came over.
Mm-hmm.
But Dynamite, for some reason, always liked me. The only thing Dynamite ever did to me, one time he came up to me and he started whispering in my ear. Of course, I knew never to drink nothing that Dynamite Kid had to offer.
Oh, great.
There was another guy that came up from Ohio for a while, Ronnie Lee, that stayed at Dynamite's house. And Dynamite said, Ronnie, how about some of my hot chocolate? Because it's wintertime. Ronnie had diarrhea for 2 weeks.
Oh, come on now.
And finally had to leave the territory. I remember one time in the van, someone passed gas, and Ronnie said, oh, if only I could do that without messing myself. But Dynamite never, ever, ever, ever done anything to me. When I met him, guys, he would go in the ring and work 30 minutes, and he would come out and do 1,000 Hindu squats. I mean, he was a total machine. The only rib Dynamite played on me was David Patterson and Lynn Denton was leaving the territory. They had got mad over a payoff. Well, early that morning, Lynn Denton came over and knocked on my door. And he said, small package me, Bobby Fulton. I said, what? He said, small package me right here on the front porch. I did. And David Patterson counted 1, 2, 3, and they said, now you're the new North American Tag Team Champion. And I thought, what? I can't believe this.
I've heard
So
of a
I
house
sat
show,
over
but
at
this
my
is a
house
little
one-
ridiculous.
Yeah. Here I am. I didn't even get paid. I didn't even get paid or nothing. But here I am, the champion. And
Congratulations.
finally, that was about 8 or 9 in the morning.
Oh, my God.
And I didn't know what to do. I thought, do I go Stu Hart?
Have breakfast.
I mean, you know, yeah.
Say in the morning.
And finally, Dynamite Kid came over and knocked at my door and said, Bobby, I believe you have a small package for me. And I handed him the belts. And it
Nice.
was lots of fun, but I realized then that it was a rib and Dynamite was in on it and
boy.
everything like that. So that was my first major title win without an audience. I guess that was a dirt match.
You brought the house down. Congratulations.
Yes.
You wrestled with the Red Rooster. I mean, Terry Taylor.
Terry Taylor.
Any thoughts on Terry Taylor, and is he underappreciated over the years?
Yes, Terry is. I first met Terry when I was in Memphis, and I was Terry's first opponent. The night he wrestled, and it was about 1981.
Wow.
He came to Memphis territory, and we wrestled in a babyface match in Memphis, Tennessee. And we became part of the Memphis territory. It was Jerry Lawler. I don't even think the Fabulous Ones had came on the scene yet. As a matter of fact, Terry Taylor was considered for one part of the original Fabulous Ones.
Okay.
But for some reason, something happened, we didn't get a part of it. But Terry was always a student of the school of wrestling. He wrote his finish every night and other finishes, so he always had a good mind for the business. Now, what happened was, when we became the Fantastic Ones, was back then, wrestling wasn't nationwide. Jerry Lawler was getting ready to run opposition to Jerry Jarrett. And I didn't want to go opposition. And what was going to happen was the territory was red hot. And one week, we were on the road to TV, and Jerry Lawler was going to own it with Lance Russell and about 50 other guys. Well, when him and Jerry Jarrett made amends, they had now 75 guys in the territory. So Atlanta was pretty burnt out, and Ole and Barnett and them was going to Ohio and Michigan and West Virginia. So they made a deal with Jerry Jarrett to send a crew down to Atlanta. And Bill Dundee was the booker. And they sent me and Terry Taylor. They made us the Fantastic Ones. They gave us the same suits that Steve and Stan wore for their videos, and did the same thing. Because, like I said, you would have the Sheik in one territory, the great Mephisto would be in another territory, and the only thing that would connect you would be the wrestling magazines before the internet. So we went down there, and we were the Fantastic Ones, and we became a team, and I enjoyed Terry. He's a phenomenal wrestler. He has a great mind for the business, and he is now at the Performance Center, and he's teaching down there. But yes, Terry was a great hand in wrestling, and he was always nice to me. I always got along with him, as a matter of fact, and he was really, really good. He's very underrated, very underappreciated. It was a real.
What did you think when you saw the Red
what
Rooster?
Vince did to him, making him the Red Rooster
Yeah.
up there in New York for whatever reason.
Yeah. Did that bug you when you saw the Red
Wait
Rooster?
a minute, hold on. Bobby, I love
He loves the Red Rooster.
I am
I
a
tell him he's
huge
crazy.
fan of that gimmick. I'm
Hey,
sorry.
Bobby, please help me out here. The Red Rooster.
Guys, Vince took a lot of guys, and look, he made Dory Funk's house fun.
Polka dots for Dusty.
Dusty polka dots, and
Yeah.
Dusty turned that into a win-win,
Yeah.
especially when he had his valet out there, and they danced it up. Dusty Rhodes. Guys, a lot of people knocked Dusty, but I worked for him, and I knew him. He was one of the geniuses
Absolutely.
in professional wrestling.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, in the ring and out of the ring.
Yep.
I know a lot of guys used to be mad at him because when you're the booker, you're the only one you can really count on. The rest of the guys will come and go. But would you build your territory around you? Yes. That's just like you two fellas. If you started having somebody guest host and do something on your show, you said, hold on. This is the Monty and Pharaoh show. This isn't the XYZ show. So you guys are the main leaders. You're going to be here week after week, show after show. You know you can count on you. And that's the way Dusty and so many of the other bookers felt throughout the years. So don't get mad at the booker for putting himself on top, especially when he can carry the ball. Now, a lot of guys would get mad because Dusty never stopped at the gym. But look, guys, Dusty had a set of huevos that's unbelievable because he would wear a pair of little tiny trunks, and he played that song, Don't Judge a Book by Looking at the Cover. And man, he had more charisma in his little finger than most guys have ever in the professional wrestling business.
Yep. Yep. And Dusty was a big dude. Not for nothing. Dusty wasn't a small guy at all.
No,
In my mind.
no.
He's a big dude.
And he had the talk, guys.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He
You
was
know,
great.
I think about that. I think about the wrestlers of the day. But I also think about the talkers of the day. The Dusty Rhodes, the handsome Jimmy Valiants, so many Austin Idol.
Yes.
Jerry the King Lawler, he had it all.
Yep.
He could talk, and he could wrestle, he could get in the ring. But not a lot of guys had both things. I heard you talking about Roman Reigns while I was getting ready to come on. And I always said when Vince was trying to push him down everybody's throats as a babyface, I said he needs to be a heel.
Agreed. Agreed.
Roman needs to be a heel.
No doubt.
Now, finally, he's at his right place.
Yep. Yep. What do you think of the booking, though, over those years where people were complaining about it? While I do agree that he was much better as a heel and that we finally got to where we needed to get with him, I almost feel like the fact that at least Vince stuck with him, even though he was a face, put a lot of titles on him, the years added up, and I feel like the resume is even more enhanced with this heel turn. Any thoughts on that?
Right, but just let me say this first. I went to Puerto Rico one time after Bruiser Brody had died, and the territory was down. I went. Me and Tommy used to fly in all the time for the big shows, and they would have 3 stadiums in one night packed. And I went over there with my brother George, Jackie Fulton, and the houses were horrible. And I rode with Carlos to one of the shows. And I said, Carlos, your business is bad. I said, let me tell you how to pop your territory. I said, you and Jose Gonzalez have a history here. Both of you guys are baby faces, but you've bled and fought. And I said, you guys against each other will not turn one heel or one baby, but will draw. Well, they ended up doing that angle because I talked to Ronnie Jordan, and Ronnie said they popped the territory. I said, what'd they do? And he told me exactly what I said to Carlos. And what I'm getting ready to tell you is, you see, Vince was paving the road for Roman Reigns.
Right.
Investing time in what was to come. And guys, that's like Ric Flair said about MMA. It's hard to establish guys that don't last a long time.
Right.
But when you got Roman Reigns, who has had years as a babyface, wins and loses, wins and losses, and now he's a heel, the head of the table, like you said, all those years on TV amounts to millions of dollars in promoting. It's just like Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler in Memphis. It's just like the guys that was in Atlanta, the guys in Florida, the Von Erichs in Texas.
Yep.
So on and so forth. It's the same formula. It's just on a worldwide scale, and Roman Reigns is one that has benefited from it. And I'm glad, because I feel like this, that it's all right for the WWE to come to town, but when you have that star quality, it adds to the product even more. It's like the last big run was Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And then after that, Vince really didn't want to establish stars because he wanted it like the WWE, some of the town, that don't matter who we have. But I always said to myself, I know he's making billions, but why not make trillions and establish these guys as stars, not just call them superstars, but guys like Roman Reigns and these guys be known for who they are.
One guy that doesn't get a lot of play on the Monty Nefaro show is the exotic Adrian Street. And he always seemed like a pretty small guy to me. But now that you hear about him, supposedly he was super tough and could really kick the crap out of people. Can you share your thoughts on Adrian Street?
I first met Adrian Street on Thanksgiving Day at Superstar Bill Dundee's house in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Adrian Street and Miss Linda came to Thanksgiving dinner along with Jonathan Boyd and Luke Williams, who was the sheep herders then. And I met all 4 of them for the very first time, and they would all be integral, from Superstar Bill Dundee to Adrian Street to Luke Williams, in my career. very instrumental. I'll never forget, Adrian Street was a super tough guy. But Linda, I don't know if you know it or not, was a very tough woman. Did you guys know that?
No,
No.
no.
She was a shooter like Adrian was. She could beat guys up, stretch them. She even got Jim Cornette down one time and stretched him in the dressing room.
I would have loved to
Well,
see
as a
that.
matter of fact, I'll never forget, I was wrestling Adrian Street in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And he got mad at me for whatever reason in the ring one night. And he busted one of them mirrors over my head, teaching me a lesson. And I mean, I got juice and everything, but then I wrestled him in San Antonio, and we had a great program. And it was me against him for the Southwest Junior United States title, I think it was. But I'll never forget, one time we were wrestling, and I was laying down on the mat, and Adrian grabbed the belt. And all of a sudden, I was in real good shape. He took the championship belt and tried to push it into my teeth, the side of it. And I caught it just in time. And I said, "Hey, man, are you all right?" He said, "I'm just making sure that you're okay." So he must have thought I was a little stiff. Probably I was, a little excited. But then I wrestled him in San Antonio, and I loved the program, and I love Adrian Miss Linda. Then I became a fantastic and was wrestling over in Louisiana for Mid-South. Well, they brought Adrian in and put me against him one night. And he was just establishing himself then. Well, I did early in the match, one of the things that I did in San Antonio, I went out and had one of the fans take my jacket off like Miss Linda did. But it really wasn't established yet, and Adrian got a little hot. Well, it didn't do nothing to me there. It wasn't until I was in world class and I was wrestling in San Antonio, and they had Sunshine for a while as Tommy Rogers and I's manager, valet. Well, I was wrestling in a single match against Adrian, and Miss Linda was the segment of force for Adrian. Well, as soon as me and Adrian locked up, he took me down to the mat and stretched me. And he would only let me up long enough to take me back down and stretch me some more, and stretch me some more. And the only offense I had was the finish of the match. And I got the message, and I understood, and he taught me a lesson. But did he hurt me? No. But could he hurt people? Yes. Johnny Mantell tried him, and Johnny fancied himself as a shooter. And Adrian Street rode him like a dog in Shreveport, and we all watched that. I believe it was Shreveport or New Orleans. Johnny had made the comment, "I'm going to stretch Adrian Street. I'm going to hurt him tonight."